As they moved through the house together, Diego asking questions about the electrical quirks she'd noticed, Marina felt more engaged than she had in months. Someone was actually listening to her observations, treating her input as valuable. When she mentioned that the light in the master bedroom sometimes dimmed for no apparent reason, Diego took notes and investigated thoroughly. "You're very observant," he told her as they stood in her bedroom, him examining the overhead fixture while she tried not to think about how strange it felt to have another man in the space she shared with Raphael. Most people don't notice these subtle changes, but they can be early warning signs of bigger problems. The bedroom suddenly felt too intimate, too personal. Marina's eyes fell on the king-size bed with its perfectly made covers, the matching knit stands with their matching lamps, the framed wedding photo that showed her and Raphael smiling at the camera with what now seemed like forced enthusiasm. "We should probably check the living room next," she said quickly, leading Diego out of the bedroom and down the hallway. But as they descended the stairs together, Marina caught herself stealing glances at Diego's profile, noting the way his work shirt stretched across his shoulders, the competent way he handled his tools. She felt the flutter of something she hadn't experienced in years' attraction, desire, the simple pleasure of being in the company of a man who seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. The realization should have alarmed her, should have sent her retreating to the safety of her emotional numbness. Instead, it felt like waking up from a long sleep. Over the next hour, Diego methodically checked every electrical component in the house, while Marina found excuses to stay nearby. She offered to hold his flashlight, to move furniture so he could access outlets, to explain the history of various rooms and their quirks. It was the most conversation she'd had with another person in months. "This is a beautiful house," Diego said as he tested the chandelier in the dining room. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years, Marina replied, then found herself adding, "though sometimes it feels much longer." Diego glanced at her with those perceptive green eyes. Big houses can feel empty sometimes, even when they're full of beautiful things. The observation was so accurate, so perfectly articulated, that Marina felt tears prick her eyes. She turned away, pretending to straighten the already perfect place settings on the dining room table. "I'm sorry," Diego said quietly. "I didn't mean to say anything wrong." "You didn't," Marina assured him, still not trusting herself to meet his eyes. You understand things." They moved to the living room, where Diego examined the overhead lights that Raphael had complained about. As he worked, Marina found herself really looking at the space for the first time in months. It was beautiful, she supposed decorated, in the neutral tones Raphael preferred, furnished with the expensive pieces he'd selected. But it felt like a showroom, not a home. There was nothing of her personality in it, nothing that reflected her tastes or interests. "Do you mind me asking what you do?" Diego asked from where he stood on a ladder, checking the light fixture. "Besides creating that amazing garden, I mean." The question caught Marina off guard. I used to be a graphic designer, but I haven't worked in a couple of years." "Used to be? Did you stop enjoying it?" Marina considered the question. Had she stopped enjoying it? Or had she simply been convinced that she didn't need it, that Raphael's income was sufficient, that her little design projects were just hobbies that took time away from more important things? "I'm not sure I ever stopped enjoying it," she said. Slowly, "I think I just stopped believing I was good at it." Diego climbed down from the ladder and turned to face her fully. "What kind of design did you do?" "Mostly branding for small businesses. Logos, website design, marketing materials. Nothing too exciting." "That sounds exciting to me," Diego said with genuine interest. "I've always admired people who can take an idea and make it visual, you know. Make it something people can connect with." Marina felt that same flush of pleasure she'd experienced earlier. When was the last time someone had expressed interest in her work? When was the last time Raphael had even mentioned her design background, except to suggest that it was? Behind her now? "I have some samples upstairs," she found herself saying. "In my old portfolio? Would you like to see them?" The invitation surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise Diego, but he nodded eagerly. "I'd love to." They climbed the stairs together, and Marina led him to the small room that had once been designated as her office. It was still set up with her desk and computer, though both were covered with a thin layer of dust. Raphael had suggested she might want to convert it to a guest room, but she had resisted, clinging to this one space that was still hers. Marina pulled her portfolio from the desk drawer, blowing off the dust with a mixture of embarrassment and sadness. She hadn't looked at these samples in over a year, hadn't thought about the satisfaction she'd once felt when a design came together perfectly. "These are incredible," Diego said as he flipped through the pages, and Marina could tell. He meant it. "Look at this logo. It's so clean and elegant, but it tells a complete story. And this website layout. You have a real eye for color and composition." "Thank you," Marina said quietly, looking at her work through his eyes, and remembering why she had loved it so much. "I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed the creative process." "Why did you stop?" The question was asked gently, without judgment, but it still made Marina's chest tighten. How could she explain that she'd stopped because Raphael had gradually convinced her that her work wasn't necessary, that it was a distraction from the important business of being his wife? How could she admit that somewhere along the way she'd lost confidence in her own abilities? "Life got complicated," she said finally. Diego nodded as if he understood the weight of unspoken stories. "It's never too late to start again, you know. These days, a lot of design work can be done remotely. You could ease back into it at your own pace." The suggestion sent a thrill of possibility through Marina, followed immediately by a familiar anxiety. What would Raphael say? He'd been so clear about her not needing to work, about her focusing on the home and their future family instead. "I should probably get back to checking the electrical system," Diego said, seeming to sense her internal conflict. "But thank you for sharing these with me. You're incredibly talented." As they made their way back downstairs, Marina felt as if she were seeing her house and herself through new eyes. The perfectly organized spaces suddenly seemed sterile rather than elegant. The careful color schemes felt restrictive rather than sophisticated. Everything was beautiful and empty, like her life. Diego finished his inspection in the basement, checking the main electrical panel and the wiring for the hot water heater. When he emerged, wiping his hands on a rag, he seemed satisfied with what he'd found. "Everything looks good," he reported. "Your electrical system is in excellent condition. No problems that I can see." Marina felt an unexpected disappointment. If there were no problems, it meant Diego had no reason to come back. The afternoon would end, he would leave, and she would return to her routine of silence and careful emptiness. "Though," Diego continued, tucking his tools back into his box, "I did notice that the outlet in your office, your computer room, is on an older circuit that might not handle a lot of equipment if you ever decided to set up a full design studio up there." Marina's heart skipped. "Is that something that would need to be fixed?" "Not necessarily fixed, but upgraded if you plan to use more equipment. Modern design software can be pretty demanding on a system." He paused, studying her face. "Something to think about, anyway." The implication hung in the air between them. An upgrade would mean another visit, another afternoon of conversation and connection. Marina knew she should say it wasn't necessary, that she had no plans to resume her design work, but the words wouldn't come. How much would something like that cost? She heard herself asking. "I'd have to do some measurements and check the current load on that circuit," Diego replied. "I could come back next week if you'd like. when your husband is home so we can discuss the options." "He travels a lot for work," Marina said quickly. "It might be easier if you came when he's not here. I can make decisions about the house improvements." It was only a small lie. She could make decisions, even if she rarely did anymore. And Raphael was indeed traveling frequently, though he'd never left her in charge of home improvements before. "Would Thursday work?" Diego asked. "Around the same time?" Thursday would be perfect. They stood in the foyer for a moment, neither seeming eager to end the encounter. Marina felt a strange reluctance to open the front door, to let Diego walk out of her life and return her to the silence. "Thank you for the coffee," Diego said finally, "and for showing me your design work. You've made my afternoon much more pleasant than the usual service call." Marina woke to the familiar sound of the shower turning on. 6 in the morning, as always. Raphael followed his morning routine with the precision of a Swiss watch. Shower, coffee, newspaper, mechanical kiss on her forehead, and the door closing. Until 9 at night. 3 years of marriage had transformed love into a well-rehearsed protocol. She remained in bed, staring at the ceiling she knew by heart. Every crack, every stain from the leak they'd fixed 2 winters ago, every shadow cast by the morning light filtering through the cream-colored curtains. She had chosen with such care when they first moved into the house on Maple Street. The house was Raphael's dream. A 2-story colonial with a white picket fence, a garden where Marina could plant her roses, and a garage for the car he polished every Saturday. It was supposed to be their sanctuary, the place where they would build their future together. Instead, it had become a beautiful prison where 2 strangers shared meals in silence and slept on opposite sides of a king-size bed. "I'm leaving," Raphael called from downstairs, his voice carrying the same indifference it had held for months. "No, goodbye. No, see you tonight." Just a statement of fact. Marina heard the front door close, followed by the sound of his BMW starting and pulling out of the driveway. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. The house felt different when he was gone, lighter somehow, as if his absence lifted an invisible weight from the rooms. She padded downstairs in her silk nightgown, a gift from Raphael's mother, who still believed her son had chosen well. The kitchen was immaculate, as always. Raphael was obsessively neat, a trait that had once charmed her and now felt suffocating. Every surface gleamed, every item in its designated place, every sign of life carefully erased. Marina made herself a cup of real coffee, not the instant kind Raphael preferred for efficiency, and sat by the bay window, overlooking the garden. Her garden, really. Raphael had no interest in the flowers, the herbs, or the small vegetable patch she had cultivated in the back corner. It was one of the few things in the house that was entirely hers. The roses were blooming beautifully this year. Red ones, pink ones, and her favorite white ones that climbed the trellis she had installed herself after watching YouTube tutorials. Raphael had offered to hire someone, but Marina wanted to do it herself. She needed to feel capable of something, needed to prove that she could create beauty with her own hands. As she sipped her coffee, Marina caught her reflection in the window glass. At 31, she was still beautiful, though she rarely felt it anymore. Her dark hair had grown longer than Raphael liked. He preferred it in a neat bob that didn't require much maintenance. Her green eyes, once bright with laughter and dreams, had developed a sadness she tried to hide behind carefully applied makeup. When had she become this person? When had the vibrant woman who used to paint on weekends and dream of traveling to Europe become this shadow who moved through her days like a ghost in her own home? The answer came to her gradually, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. It had been small things at first. Raphael suggesting she didn't need to work since his salary as a financial advisor was more than sufficient. Raphael choosing restaurants because he had better taste in these things. Raphael deciding they should spend holidays with his family because hers was too chaotic. Each decision seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they had gradually erased her until she wasn't sure who she was anymore. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her sister Emma in California. "How are you doing, sis? Haven't heard from you in weeks." Marina stared at the message for a long moment. How was she doing? She wasn't sure she remembered how to answer that question honestly. She typed back, "I'm fine. Everything's good here." The lie came so easily now. She finished her coffee and went upstairs to shower and dress. Another day stretched ahead of her, empty and predictable. She would tend to her garden, maybe read for a while, prepare dinner for Raphael, who would eat it while checking emails on his phone, and then they would watch television in separate chairs until it was time for bed. But today would be different, though Marina didn't know it yet. Today, the doorbell would ring at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and everything would change. The doorbell rang just as Marina was deadheading the roses in her front garden. She wiped her hands on her gardening gloves and walked to the door, expecting perhaps a delivery or someone selling something she didn't need. Instead, she found herself face to face with a man she didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, and green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He wore jeans and a work shirt with Martinez Electrical embroidered on the pocket, and carried a toolbox that had seen better days. "Mrs. Santiago?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marina couldn't quite place. "I'm Diego Martinez. Your husband called about some electrical work?" Marina blinked, momentarily confused. Raphael hadn't mentioned calling an electrician. But then again, Raphael didn't mention much of anything to her these days. "Oh, yes, of course. Please, come in." As Diego followed her into the house, Marina became acutely aware of her appearance. She was wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dirt under her fingernails from the garden work. Not exactly the image of the perfect housewife Raphael preferred to present to the world. "Your husband mentioned some issues with the kitchen outlets," Diego said, setting his toolbox down and looking around the space with professional interest. "And maybe some problems with the lighting in the living room?" "Yes, that sounds right," Marina replied, though she wasn't sure what problems he was referring to. The outlets worked fine as far as she knew, and the living room lights seemed perfectly adequate. But Raphael was particular about these things, always finding flaws that needed fixing. Diego moved through the kitchen with easy confidence, checking outlets, testing switches, examining the electrical panel in the hallway. Marina found herself watching him work, struck by how different he seemed from Raphael. Where her husband was always tense, always rushing, Diego moved with a calm deliberateness that was oddly soothing. "Would you like some coffee?" Marina heard herself asking. "I just made a fresh pot." Diego looked up from where he was crouched. By an outlet, genuine surprise crossing his features. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Santiago. I'd love some." As Marina poured the coffee, she realized it had been months since she'd offered hospitality to anyone. Raphael rarely brought people home, and she had gradually lost touch with her own friends. The simple act of handing Diego a mug felt like a small rebellion against the sterile perfection of her daily routine. "This is excellent coffee," Diego said after taking a sip. "Much better than the usual stuff I get on the job." Marina felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "Thank you. I grind the beans myself." "That makes all the difference," Diego agreed, then nodded toward the bay window. "Those are beautiful roses out there. You have a gift for gardening." "You think so?" Marina moved to the window, looking out at her garden with fresh eyes. "Raphael thinks I spend too much time on them." Something shifted in Diego's expression, but he didn't comment on her husband's opinion. Instead, he said, My grandmother always said that a person who can make things grow has a special kind of soul. She'd love your garden." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee and looking out at the roses. Marina couldn't remember the last time someone had complimented her garden or anything else she'd done. The warmth of Diego's words settled in her chest like sunshine. "I should get back to work," Diego said eventually, finishing his coffee. "Thank you for this. It really hit the spot." As he returned to his inspection of the electrical system, Marina found herself lingering in the kitchen instead of retreating to her usual spots around the house. She pretended to organize already organized cabinets, to wipe down already clean counters, anything to stay in the same room as this man who had spoken to her like she mattered. "You know," Diego said from where he was working behind the refrigerator, "I'm not finding much wrong with these outlets. Everything seems to be working fine." Marina felt a stab of embarrassment. "Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe Raphael was mistaken, or maybe I misunderstood what he told you." "Hey, no worries at all," Diego interrupted, emerging from behind the refrigerator with a reassuring smile. "It happens all the time. Better to be safe than sorry when it comes to electrical work. And honestly, your husband was smart to have things checked. This is an older house, and sometimes problems develop gradually." His kindness in the face of what seemed like a wasted trip struck Marina deeply. Raphael would have been furious about the mix-up, would have made her feel foolish for not knowing exactly what needed to be fixed. But Diego just shrugged it off, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Since I'm here anyway, Diego," continued, "would you like me to check the rest of the house? Sometimes there are issues that aren't obvious until you really look." Marina found herself nodding eagerly. Yes, that would be wonderful. To be happy. Raphael mentioned something about the upstairs as she prepared a simple bathroom light flickering as she took a long bath with expensive oils she'd been saving for special occasions. As she climbed into the king-size bed, they felt less lonely somehow. With Raphael gone, for the first time in years, Marina fell asleep, thinking about the future instead of just enduring the present. Friday morning, Marina woke with an energy she hadn't felt in months. Instead of her usual coffee in the bay window, she took her mug out to the garden and walked among her roses, planning improvements and additions. She would plant bulbs for spring flowers, maybe add a small herb garden near the kitchen window, certainly expand the vegetable patch. These weren't just idle daydreams. For the first time in years, Marina was making plans that felt real, achievable. Hers. She spent the morning researching design software and equipment online, creating detailed lists and comparing prices. The graphics card alone would cost more than she'd spent on herself in the last 6 months, but the investment felt justified in a way that surprised her. She was investing in herself, in her future, in the possibility of independence. Around noon, her sister Emma called from California. "Marina, I was just thinking about you. How are things?" This time, instead of the automatic fine, Marina found herself actually considering the question. "Things are changing," she said carefully. "I'm thinking about getting back into design." "Work? Really?" Emma's voice lit up with excitement. "That's wonderful. You are so talented, and I always wondered why you stopped." Raphael thought. Marina began, then stopped herself. Why was she explaining Raphael's thinking instead of her own? "I think I convinced myself I wasn't good enough, but maybe I was wrong." "Of course you were wrong. Remember that logo you designed for my friend's bakery? She still uses it, and she's expanded to 3 locations now. You have real talent, Marina." After the call, Marina sat in her office and opened her laptop again. This time, instead of just browsing, she created accounts on several freelancing platforms. She uploaded her best portfolio pieces, wrote a professional bio, set her rates. Her finger hovered over the Publish Profile button for several long minutes before she clicked it. There, She was officially back in business. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Marina was working in the garden when she heard her name called from the front yard. She looked up to see Mrs. Chun from next door, approaching with a small potted plant in her hands. "Marina, dear, I have a cutting from my jasmine plant. I thought you might like it for your garden." Marina accepted the gift with genuine pleasure. Mrs. Chun was a widow in her 70s who had lived on Maple Street for decades. But Marina had rarely done more than wave to her across their adjoining yards. Raphael wasn't fond of what he called neighborhood complications. "Thank you so much," Marina said. "It's beautiful. Would you like to come in for some tea?" Mrs. Chun's face brightened. "I'd love that." They sat in Marina's kitchen, sipping tea, and talking about gardening, about the neighborhood's history, about Mrs. Chun's late husband who had been an engineer. It was the kind of casual, warm conversation Marina realized she'd been hungry for without knowing it. "Your roses are the envy of the whole street," Mrs. Chun said. "I've been meaning to ask what your secret is." "No secret, really. Just attention and love." "The best things always need both," Mrs. Chun observed with a knowing smile. After Mrs. Chun left, Marina planted the jasmine cutting in a spot where it would climb the side fence and eventually fill her garden with fragrance. As she worked with her hands in the soil, she thought about attention and love, about the things that bloom when they're properly tended. That evening, she cooked herself a real dinner, not the simple, efficient meals she usually prepared, but something elaborate and delicious. She lit candles, opened a bottle of wine, and ate at the dining room table instead of standing at the kitchen counter. It felt like a celebration, though she wasn't sure exactly what she was celebrating. Independence, maybe possibility, a small rebellion of treating herself as someone worth caring for. Saturday afternoon, Raphael returned from his business trip. Marina heard his car in the driveway and felt a familiar knot of tension form in her stomach. She was in the kitchen when he entered, and she greeted him with the same careful smile she'd worn for months. "How was your trip?" she asked, accepting. His perfunctory kiss, productive. "The Henderson account is finally moving forward." He looked around the kitchen with his usual inspection, checking for anything out of place. "How were things here?" "Fine. Quiet." Raphael nodded absently, already pulling out his laptop to check emails. The easy warmth Marina had felt all weekend began to dissipate, replaced by the familiar feeling of walking on eggshells. "Oh," she said carefully, "the electrician came by on Thursday. He gave me an estimate for upgrading the office circuit." Raphael looked up with mild interest. "How much?" Marina named the figure Diego had given her, watching Raphael's expression shift to disapproval. "That seems excessive for a hobby setup," he said. "Are you sure you need all that?" "Well, if I'm going to do design work properly, Marina." Raphael's voice carried the patient tone that always made her feel like a child being corrected. "We've discussed this. You don't need to work. And even if you wanted to pursue design as a hobby, surely you don't need professional-grade equipment." Marina felt the familiar shrinking sensation, the way her dreams always seemed to diminish under Raphael's practical scrutiny. But this time, something pushed back. "I've already set up profiles on some freelancing platforms," she said quietly. "I think there's real demand for my skills." Raphael's expression hardened slightly. "Without discussing it with me first?" "It's not something I thought required permission." The words surprised them both. Marina rarely challenged Raphael's authority over their joint decisions, and she could see him recalculating how to respond. "Of course you don't need permission," he said, smoothly, "but major life decisions affect both of us. I would have liked to be consulted." "It's not a major life decision. It's a few freelance projects that require expensive electrical upgrades and equipment purchases. That sounds major to me." Marina felt the walls of her small rebellion closing in. Raphael was right, of course. He was always right. The money was joint money. The house was joint property. The decision affected them both. But as she stood there, watching Raphael's expression grow more disapproving by the moment, Marina thought about
"Thank you
Diego's
for listening,"
question. Marina replied, then realized how revealing those words were. "I mean, thank you for being so thorough." Diego smiled, and Marina noticed again how his eyes crinkled at the corners. "I'll see you Thursday, then." After he left, Marina stood at the front window, watching his truck disappear down Maple Street. The house felt different now, charged with possibility and memory. She walked through the rooms Diego had just examined, seeing them through his eyes, imagining them filled with her own personality instead of Raphael's careful control dot in her old office. She sat at her dusty desk and opened her laptop for the first time in months. The screen flickered to life, and she found herself browsing design websites, looking at current trends, feeling the familiar stirring of creative inspiration. When Raphael came home that evening, Marina was in the kitchen preparing dinner as usual. He kissed her forehead in his mechanical way and sat at the counter to check his emails while she finished cooking. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up from his phone, the question delivered with the same routine indifference as always. "Fine," Marina replied, setting his plate in front of him. "An electrician came by to check those outlets you were worried about." "Good. Any problems?" "Not really. Everything's in good condition." She paused, then added carefully, "Though he mentioned that the circuit in my old office might need upgrading if I ever wanted to set up design equipment again." Raphael finally looked up from his phone, his expression shifting to the patient tolerance he used when he thought she was being impractical. "Marina, we've talked about this. You don't need to work. My salary is more than enough for both of us." "I know," she said quickly. "I just thought ... maybe as a hobby. Something to fill the time when you're traveling. Hobbies are fine, but why would you need to upgrade electrical work for a hobby? That seems like an unnecessary expense." Marina felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the way her ideas always seemed to shrink under Raphael's practical scrutiny. "You're right. It was just a thought." Raphael returned to his phone, the conversation already dismissed from his mind. But as Marina cleaned up after dinner, she found herself thinking about Diego's words. It's never too late to start again. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. Marina found herself counting the hours, planning what she would wear, what she would say. She told herself it was just excitement about potentially upgrading her office space, about the possibility of returning to design work. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She knew she was looking forward to seeing Diego again. Raphael left for a 3-day business trip on Wednesday evening, kissing her forehead with his usual distraction and reminding her to water his orchids in the sunroom, as if she needed reminding about the care of plants. "I'll be back Saturday afternoon," he said, wheeling his perfectly packed suitcase to the front door. "Try not to make any major decisions while I'm gone." The comment was delivered with a smile, but Marina heard the underlying message. Don't do anything without consulting me first. It was the same message she'd been receiving for 3 years, so subtle and wrapped in concern that she'd barely noticed how it had shaped her behavior. After Raphael left, Marina walked through the house, in her nightgown, feeling the space differently. With him gone, the room seemed to exhale, to become softer somehow. She made herself a cup of real coffee and sat in the living room, not in her usual chair, but in Raphael's. The view from his seat was different, more commanding. She could see the entire room, the front window, the hallway leading to the rest of the house. Was this how he saw their life together? As something to be monitored and controlled? The thought disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. Thursday afternoon arrived with unusual warmth for October. Marina had changed clothes 3 times before settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater. That brought out her eyes, not that she was trying to impress anyone, she told herself. She was just tired of wearing the same faded t-shirts and shapeless clothes she'd defaulted to over the past few years. When the doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock, Marina's heart gave an embarrassing flutter. She opened the door to find Diego, standing there with his toolbox and that same easy smile. "Mrs. Santiago," he said, "how are you today?" "Please, call me Marina," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "And I'm well, thank you. Can I offer you some coffee?" "That sounds wonderful." As Marina prepared the coffee, she was acutely aware of Diego moving through her kitchen, of his presence filling the space with a warmth she hadn't realized was missing. He examined the electrical panel again, taking measurements and making notes in a small notebook he pulled from his shirt pocket. "So tell me about your design setup," he said, accepting the coffee mug with a grateful nod. "What kind of equipment are you thinking about using?" Marina felt a flush of excitement. "Well, I'd need a high-end computer with a good graphics card, probably dual monitors for working on larger projects, a professional scanner, maybe a large format printer for proofs." She trailed off, suddenly self-conscious about her enthusiasm. When was the last time she'd spoken with such passion about anything? "That sounds like a serious setup," Diego said with approval. "Are you planning to freelance again?" "Maybe," Marina said, then more firmly, "Yes, I think I am. I've been looking at some online platforms where designers can find projects. It seems like there's still demand for the kind of work I used to do. That's exciting. There's nothing like doing work you love." They discussed the technical requirements for upgrading the office circuit, with Diego explaining the process in terms that didn't make her feel stupid or overwhelmed. It was such a contrast to Raphael's communication style, which often left her feeling like she was bothering him with unnecessary questions. "I'd need to come back to do the actual installation," Diego said as they climbed the stairs to examine the office space more closely. "Probably take about half a day. Would that work for you?" "Yes," Marina said, perhaps too quickly. "When could you do it?" "Next week? I have an opening on Tuesday." Tuesday would be perfect. In her office, Diego took more detailed measurements, while Marina found herself straightening things that didn't need straightening, organizing papers that were already organized. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been since high school, hyper-aware of Diego's presence in her personal space. "You know," Diego said, looking up from where he was examining an outlet, "I've been thinking about what you showed me last week. Your design work. I might actually have a project you'd be interested in." Marina's pulse quickened. "Really? My cousin owns a small restaurant in town. Family place. Been around for about 10 years, but they're looking to rebrand. New logo. Maybe a website, some marketing materials. Nothing huge, but it could be a good project to get back into things." The offer was so unexpected, so perfect, that Marina felt tears prick her eyes. "That sounds wonderful, but I should probably wait until I have my equipment set up properly." "No rush," Diego assured her. "They're not in a hurry, and I told them I knew someone who might be interested. I showed them your portfolio samples. I hope you don't mind." "I took some pictures with my phone last week." Marina minded not at all. In fact, the thought of Diego caring enough about her work to photograph it and share it with his family made her chest warm with gratitude. "They loved your style," Diego continued. "Clean but warm, professional but approachable. Exactly what they're looking for." As Diego finished his measurements and prepared to leave, Marina felt the same reluctance she'd experienced the week before. The afternoon had passed too quickly, filled with conversation and possibility, and the simple pleasure of being treated like her opinions mattered. "I'll have an estimate for you by Monday," Diego said as they stood in the foyer again. "And I'll bring my cousin's contact information when I come Tuesday. You can decide then if you're interested in the project." "Thank you," Marina said, and meant it more deeply than he could know, "for everything. You've given me something to look forward to." Diego paused with his hand on the doorknob, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. Marina nodded, not trusting her voice. "Are you happy, Marina?" The question hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Marina opened her mouth to give the automatic response. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I be? But the lie wouldn't come. "I don't remember what happy feels like," she whispered instead. Diego's expression grew tender, concerned. "That's no way to live." "I know," Marina said, and the admission felt like a dam breaking. "I know it isn't." They stood there for a moment in silence, the weight of her confession settling between them. Marina felt exposed, vulnerable, but also oddly relieved. When was the last time someone had asked her about her happiness? When was the last time anyone had cared about her answer? "I should go," Diego said finally, but he didn't move toward the door. "But Marina, you deserve to be happy. You deserve to have your talents recognized, your opinions valued. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." After he left, Marina sat on her living room couch, in the middle this time, not in her designated chair or Raphael's, and stared out the front window at her garden. The roses were still blooming despite the October chill, defiant and beautiful.